A new governor has just taken over at the Reserve Bank at a time when growth has slowed to a shocking 5.4% in the second quarter and inflation is close to 6%. Many banking regulation reforms like the expected loss provisioning and higher liquidity cover for unstable deposits remain in the draft stage. Coming as the new governor does from the finance ministry, offshore forex markets are penciling in even a pre-policy rate cut. So what are the immediate and medium-term tasks before the new governor? I have an elite panel to discuss that. G. Mahalingam, former Executive Director, Reserve Bank and former SEBI whole-time member. Dinesh Khara, former Chairman, State Bank of India. Neeraj, Gambhir, Group Executive and Head of Treasury, Markets and Wholesale Banking at Axis Bank. And Sakshi Gupta, Senior Economist at HDFC Bank. Gentlemen, and Sakshi, thank you very much indeed for your time. Well, Neeraj, I'm going to start with you immediately because I got a call on Monday night from Singapore asking, is there a pre-policy cut? Because, you know, the Revenue Secretary has been chosen. Has the market quietened down, or are there still expectations of a pre-February cut?
I think individuals may have their own views, but if I look at the aggregate market view, which is reflected in how the bond yields have moved and how the swap rates have moved, they've barely budged. Okay. The bond yields are pretty much at the same level where they were before the announcement. Swap rates are down a tad, but not as much. So I think the market as a whole is not expecting anything pre-policy in February. There is a wide section of market out there which believes that February rate cut is a live possibility, and probably with the new governor in charge, maybe we'll have a new deputy governor as well who's going to be in charge of monetary policy. We could have a situation where we could possibly see a February rate cut, but that also to some extent depends upon what data on inflation and growth we see from now until February. I think the expectations on inflation are that it will come down from the December highs, and we would like to see some more high-frequency data on growth to see that the expenditure that the government is doing and there is some normalization on the demand side, etc. So I think I would not expect the new governor to act in a haste at this point in time, given the way the position, the situation has been laid out by the previous governor. I do expect that the chances are there for a Feb rate cut, but I think it will depend a little bit more on the data as it shows up.
To be fair, people were expecting a rate cut even if Mr. Das was continued, because the expectation is that, growth needs a prop and inflation is at least the delta is expected to decline. But, Mr. Mahalingam, the more important thing, and you have seen many cycles here, how do finance ministry officials integrate into the Reserve Bank mold of thinking? Does the finance ministry change the Reserve Bank, or does Reserve Bank mold the finance ministry entrant?
Thanks a lot, Latha, for this invitation to participate in this panel. That's a very interesting question that you have raised. Invariably, the officials from the Ministry of Finance, they come to RBI as a governor. And at that precise point of time, if there are differences of opinion between the RBI and the government on certain issues, certainly the finance ministry officials will come with that government views, carrying the government views with them. So there is going to be a huge responsibility on the shoulders of the new governor to convince the internal bureaucracy in RBI about the change of narrative that has to come about. Now, at the same time, the RBI internal bureaucracy is also something which is given to a lot of data crunching, a lot of fact analysis, a lot of interpretations, and arriving at the policy on the basis of the economic compulsions rather than any other compulsions taking precedence. So I would say, clearly, those kinds of compulsions would have forced the Das regime, Shaktikant Das regime, to give a little more precedence to inflation compared to growth. So I have a feeling right now, that maybe the new governor is stepping into the portals of RBI with growth getting a little more precedence over the inflation. But let's also, look at the point of entry of the new governor here. He is entering at a point where there is a relative calm. Much less turmoil compared to whatever many other previous governors have entered in. So to that extent, I would say the new governor is certainly going to face an easier task. But like you are talking about the tussle between the RBI internal bureaucracy and the government.
Yeah.
Invariably, in this tussle, the RBI governor wins initially.
Okay.
That is because he knows that this is what has to be done. This is top in the priority. So obviously, the RBI internal bureaucracy would have to again do some more data crunching, look at some more fresh data coming, to adjust the narrative. I mean, there has to be an adjustment of narrative if there is going to be a tremendous change in the policy. That means growth over inflation over growth is going to change as growth over inflation. Obviously, the narrative would have to undergo a tremendous amount of change. But at the same time, let me also tell you, the RBI internal bureaucracy doesn't give up that easily. They are going to they will continue to present the data, they will continue to present the facts, and in general, the mold within RBI is one of conservatism. So they would like to look at financial stability as a very important factor. They would like to look at price stability as an important factor. So given these kinds of backdrops, they would continue to present the data over a period of time so that at least the caution and prudence rules rather than a political economy ruling. The political economy may be given some kind of a place initially, but over a period of time, it's a caution and prudence which rules. So my feeling is the initial battle is lost by the internal bureaucracy, but the internal bureaucracy inches slowly ahead, and then later it presents a very, very realistic, cautious, and a prudent picture to the new governor.
Okay, that's amazing candor and amazing insight into what happens in Mint Street building itself. Mr. Khara, you know, I have to take it from what Mr. Mahalingam says. Everybody is concentrating on this big battle of could there have been a rate cut in October itself. But, you know, there is a lot more that the ministry is pushing. And those are the banking regulations, draft regulations on ECL and more importantly on liquidity. Now, let us remember Mr. Malhotra's original position was Department of Financial Services and only then moved to Revenue. So, as a DFS guy, he knows the trouble that banks have been will face. Do you see a postponement of both these, the expected loss rules and more importantly the LCR rules? Just more time given.
First of all, thank you, Latha. And of course, what you mentioned, I would say that these were the LCR and the ECL guidelines. They were more of the draft regulations, draft paper for discussion. And of course, RBI has already collated the viewpoint of various stakeholders in the system. I think what you have mentioned in terms of Mr. Malhotra's position, since he is coming from as a Secretary Revenue, the last posting, and prior to that, he was, of course, the Secretary DFS, very closely seen the banking sector and the financial sector overall. And also, apart from that, he has also been the MD and CEO of the REC as well. So I think with that kind of a background, he has got a fair hang in terms of what really is the financial sector, what is the financial sector, and how it can really function well. So I think on that particular context, I'm sure with the kind of responses which have already been given by various stakeholders on the ECL and also LCR guidelines, and also for that matter, even guidelines relating to the provision for the project loans, etc. also. So I think these are some of the things. Probably he will be in a position to strike a better balance. And maybe what Mr. Mahalingam was saying, convincing the internal bureaucracy in RBI is equally important. And I think since he will be striking the balance, he would have seen the picture on the other side. Maybe he can be more convincing in his position while engaging with the internal bureaucracy.
What's your thought, Mr. Mahalingam? You know, this is a huge battle, actually. The interest rate is less of a battle, and it's probably only about a 6-week-old battle. But bankers have been worrying about the higher LCR, higher provisioning for infra projects, project financing that is, and higher provisioning that will come from ECL for a goodish bit. These are vast and deep regulations. You think they get postponed when the man comes from Finance Ministry?
To be very fair to RBI, when you look at LCR, I think RBI is given a fair amount of time. It's going to be implemented only in April of 2025, which is good 4 months away. I mean, from the time it was issued, it was quite long away. Now, even in the LCR, yes, there are some controversial kind of regulations, controversial kind of guidelines. So there is a possibility in my mind that while it may not be junked altogether, there may be a kind of a glide path which could be infused into LCR implementation. So instead of taking it at one go at 5% increase, maybe it would go for a smaller increase. And over a period of time, if the situation warrants that it has to be increased to say from 5 to 6, 6 to 7%, maybe they will go about that increase in a very orderly way rather than slapping an increase of almost about 5% at one go. Now, this is as far as the LCR is concerned. As far as the ECL is concerned, well, I think that's going to be a very tough call for the new governor, exceedingly tough call. Now, this is something where RBI has always been actually rooting for financial stability. They would not like to have the banking sector getting back into a turmoil, which it faced about 5, 6 years back. And thankfully, it has been brought to a position of health. But the government has equally strong arguments. When it is a healthy position, do you need to slap these kinds of charges on the banking industry in the form of provisions? So my feeling here is even on ECL, there could be a middle path struck over a period of time. So I'm hoping that over a period of time, perhaps a middle path would be found, which would be comfortable both for the banking sector as well as the regulator.
Okay, I have more to ask both, in fact, all three of you, Neeraj, Mr. Khara and you on the banking reforms, because I think that is the bigger chapter at the moment. But let me get Sakshi in, since interest rates is a talking point. Sakshi, the early numbers we are getting on the current quarter are not encouraging at all. The Godrej consumer numbers are giving the feeling that urban consumption is still struggling. Unsecured loans in so many of the banks has shown pain already. At least 3 or 4 banks have shown. So growth seems to need a prop. What's your sense the RBI will do in terms of rates?
Right, Latha, I agree with you on the growth front. I think the task ahead for the governor really now would be to, while working within the confines of this inflation, targeting framework that India has, to kind of now start looking at growth and supporting growth. While there's been a lot of talk that the second half of this year might be slightly better than the first half, but the fact of the matter is that if we are looking at sustaining growth anywhere between 6.5% for the next 4 to 6 quarters, our real policy rate is too restrictive at, the current stage at 2.5%. So there, the challenge really will be to kind of manage inflation while, starting to cut rates and bring them down, closer to 5.75 by the end of this year. That's my sense if we want to kind of achieve, or maintain growth between this 6.5%.
The other big issue is that we are going to miss Michael Patra as well. It is going to be a new MPC. That question and also more questions on the Forex. The new governor may also face, we just had our panel saying that he is coming in a calm period. Who knows, the calm may last only till Jan 20th and we may have a turbulent world. All those questions after the break to my panel. Welcome back to a very special Indianomics, which is about the new man in Mint Street, the new RBI governor, and the tasks that he faces. I've been speaking with Mr. G. Mahalingam, former ED at RBI and former whole-time member at SEBI, Dinesh Khara, former SBI Chairman, Neeraj Gambhir, the Group Executive and Head of Treasury at Axis Bank, and Sakshi Gupta, the Senior Economist from HDFC Bank. Gentlemen and Sakshi, thank you very much indeed for your patience. Neeraj, like I said before the break, we could be on the threshold of global turbulence. Will that be his big test, like we saw, Dr. Subbarao face almost in a matter of 10 days? That was, of course, layman and it was too big. But is he likely to face turbulence in a month?
So 2 comments, Latha. First of all, I think when you think about the rate cuts, while the growth narrative would warrant a rate cut, We have an inflation narrative and we have a currency narrative. And we know that Reserve Bank has been actually managing the currency quite proactively over the last almost a year. And there has been, a lot of pressure on the currency given the fact that global equity and debt flows have not been supportive. We've actually seen outflows on the equities market, and we saw outflow from the debt market in the month of November. December has been much better. I think Reserve Bank will have to very carefully think about how they want to manage currency in this environment. To me, the world is looking a far more politically unstable place at this point in time than it looked, say, about 12 months ago.
Mahalingam, you are the past master in terms of RBI handling currency. You think it's not a big problem? The Reserve Bank has done much more difficult tasks, starting from 91, again 2008, taper tantrum. This is an easy game for the Reserve Bank bureaucracy, the currency turmoil.
Yeah, Latha, I completely agree. Actually, in comparison to what happened in the past, I think Reserve Bank is facing a relatively easy situation right now. The only thing I would advise is on the liquidity front, perhaps the governor has to adopt a very carefully chalked out path. I don't think they can allow the liquidity to tighten, because if the liquidity also tightens in a big way, albeit for just about 2 months, 3 months, it could actually cut off the credit growth line. So there is a need for RBI to be pretty vigilant on the liquidity side. And the liquidity side, if the tightness is going to come through the foreign exchange, I think they better watch out on the foreign exchange side. Now, coming to the foreign exchange, if the rupee is appearing to be overvalued by about 6 to 7%, that's what the real effective exchange rate says, I have a feeling that Reserve Bank still has some room as far as allowing some more depreciation is concerned. I don't think they need to go and sell out the dollars in big lots, which will suck out a huge amount of rupee liquidity from the system. So from that perspective, I would say that a little bit of more depreciation on the rupee side by, say, about a couple of percentage points should not really alter the scenario of liquidity in a big way. That should definitely ease on the situational liquidity. And let's assume the rupee goes on a trajectory which is absolutely downward, and the RBI has to sell a lot more dollars. I think what they have to do is they have to do countervailing open market operations to restore the liquidity back to its original state. In my view, at no cost, at this very critical juncture in front of the country's economy, with the governor actually having growth precedence over inflation, liquidity cannot be allowed to be operating on tight ends at all. Even at the quarter ends, when the advance tax money is going to go away, I think it's better for Reserve Bank to be pretty proactive on the liquidity front.
Okay. Well, he evaded my bond purchases question, but I'm sure that is a weapon on the table. And now we know from hindsight why he evaded. He wanted perhaps the new man to take that call. Mr. Khara, the other point that will come, and I'm unfortunately out of time to discuss this at length, the big contention between centre and banks is the new SNA Sparsh, internet loop, this or portal. This is something which, of course, we viewers wouldn't know much. The central government now funds central schemes not through the banks. I mean, if they're transferring money from centre to states for centrally sponsored schemes, they don't just put it in the bank of the states. They put it in a portal. And as the money gets spent, it goes out. Now, this has led to a good 3 lakh crores or whatever centrally sponsored schemes not flowing through the banking system for a period of time. It ultimately flows. But till it is spent, it doesn't flow. Mr. Khara, do you think this pull and push will be answered by the new man in Mint Street?
I think we'll have to wait and watch, perhaps. And well, of course, I would only like to add what you have just mentioned, that when the 4 trillion worth of money, which used to be available to the scheduled commercial banks, they used to actually generate credit on that. So what you mentioned, that eventually it comes back, but when it comes to a multiplier effect, it gets diminished to some extent. So I think this is also one of the reasons why perhaps we have seen some kind of a stress in terms of the credit growth in the system. I believe that there would be some pragmatic view taken on this particular aspect also, because eventually speaking, the money is being maintained, the accounts downstream are being maintained by the commercial with the commercial banks, but it takes some kind of a lag. So I think if at all the money gets flown through the banking system, perhaps the credit growth can be inched up with the help of this kind of a money which will flow through the banking system as compared to when it goes through the RBI channel.
Mr. Mahalingam, I have at least like 3 questions more for you. I'll try to put them all into one. One, is Patra's absence very big? I was told that there is an old boys club in RBI. Malhotra can always phone Patra. They would become good friends in a month if they aren't already. And he would, I know the governors talk to the previous governors a lot. I know Mr. Das used to call Rangarajan and Reddy pretty frequently. So is Patra's absence, something that can be papered over? And the second more important question, he's a younger man compared to the previous secretaries who came. Malhotra is only 56 and a computer science graduate. So do you think we are going to see a lot of improvement on the use of AI, ML? So 2 separate questions.
Yeah, on the first question regarding Patra, yes, the monetary policy DG occupies a very, very important position in the overall scheme of things as far as RBI is concerned. Of course, aside, I wanted to mention a point when the governor is going to do the convincing job to RBI, to the internal bureaucracy. He remembers that the last MPC voted 4-2. So he just needs to have one more. That means to make it 4-2 in the other side. Yeah. So it's not going to be a big problem for him. But looking at Patra, certainly he occupies a very important position. Certainly, replacing the monetary policy deputy governor exactly at the time when the new governor has taken charge is going to cause some amount of discomfort for the new governor. But I would say, again, I'll come back to the internal bureaucracy. The internal bureaucracy is pretty strong in RBI. There is a bureaucracy which stretches down from executive director to the chief general manager, to the general manager, to the deputy general manager, who are all involved completely in monetary policy making. And similarly, in the forex side, you have the entire hierarchy which is involved in the specialized job of forex intervention and forex reserves management. So to that extent, a top man going missing is certainly going to cause some discomfort, but then the person who is going to be substituted immediately by another professional, that professional will get inducted into the RBI scheme of things in no time at all. Okay. So the governor should not really feel the absence. That way RBI has an excellent succession planning mechanism and the internal bureaucracy takes care of it. Regarding the second question, I completely agree with you, Latha. I think Sanjay Malhotra comes from IIT Kanpur with a computer science background. I'm happy to say I am also from IIT Kanpur, in fact. Okay. And a person with a tremendous amount of sense of computers, use of computers, artificial intelligence. I hope it is going to be very good for RBI and the financial sector as a whole, that perhaps artificial intelligence and other technology-related aspects are going to get a lot more priority. I'm not saying that Shaktikant Das did not give priority, but Sanjay Malhotra will be hands-on when it comes to giving priority to technology.
Okay, who knows? That may have been the single factor why Sanjay Malhotra was preferred as the man to head RBI. It's quite possible because the Prime Minister is very proactive in thinking about putting India into the digital map, and that may have been the convincing reason. In all, putting all these factors into consideration, it looks like we have a very good person at the top, and we have him coming at a clement time and will be able to tackle the problems that are thrown at him given the bureaucracy at RBI. Thank you very much, Mr. Mahalingam, Mr. Khara, Neeraj and Sakshi.